You think you know the story. Two hungry children, a trail of breadcrumbs, a gingerbread house, and a wicked witch with an insatiable appetite. It's a dark fairy tale about abandonment and clever survival, a warning against strangers. But what if I told you that the narrative we know as Hansel and Gretel is far older and infinitely more chilling than a mere children's fable? What if it's a story that has whispered through the darkest corners of human history for over 3,500 years? A horrifying echo from a time when famine stalked the land, when the spectre of starvation pushed humanity to unthinkable extremes, and when the very boundaries of human morality were tested to their breaking point. Because buried beneath this seemingly simple tale lies a profound secret, a narrative passed down by word of mouth through millennia, evolving yet retaining its core, terrifying essence. A story of desperate scarcity, of the ultimate taboo, of ritualistic sacrifice, of the eternal human struggle against the wild, and something far more terrifying than just a witch in the woods. Once you hear the truth behind the children and the gingerbread house, you'll never see it the same way again. Welcome back, Darklings. Before we unearth the secrets of this enduring narrative, let's begin with the most well-known version of the tale. But listen closely, because hidden in this familiar story are whispers of something far more ancient, far more visceral, waiting to be rediscovered. Every detail, every familiar phrase, holds a deeper, darker resonance, reflecting a world far removed from our own comfortable lives. Once upon a time, nestled precariously at the very edge of a great, dark, and seemingly endless forest, lived a poor woodcutter, his wife, and their two young children, a boy named Hansel and his younger sister Gretel. A terrible, relentless famine had swept through the land, casting a pall of hunger and despair over every household. Their small family was starving, their meager provisions dwindled to nothing, and the gnawing pangs of hunger became a constant, unbearable companion. One desperate night, the stepmother, her heart hardened by an unimaginable desperation born of utter destitution, convinced the woodcutter to carry the children deep into the unforgiving forest and abandon them there. Her reasoning was brutal in its simplicity. It was the only way for the adults to survive, for the family as a whole, to escape the clutches of starvation. Though heartbroken and racked with guilt, the woodcutter, seeing no other path, reluctantly agreed to this unspeakable act. Hansel, however, having secretly overheard his parents' grim, whispered plan, cleverly gathered a pocketful of small, shimmering white pebbles from outside their cottage. As they walked deeper and deeper into the bewildering gloom of the woods the next morning, he secretly, meticulously, dropped them one by one along the winding path, hoping against hope to find their way home. That night, abandoned in the terrifying silence of the wilderness, they found their way back by following the moonlight, glinting on the trail of pebbles. Angered by their return, and driven by the same relentless hunger, the stepmother persuaded the woodcutter to try again, this time leading the children even further into the impenetrable depths of the forest. This time, Hansel, unable to find pebbles, could only gather a handful of dry breadcrumbs, which he scattered along the path with desperate hope. But when morning came, a cruel twist of fate, the hungry birds of the forest had eaten all the crumbs, leaving no trace. The children were truly lost, their hope extinguished, wandering deeper and deeper into the terrifying, trackless wilderness, utterly at the mercy of the vast, indifferent woods. Just as despair threatened to consume them, just as their strength waned and their stomachs ached, they stumbled upon a most extraordinary, almost miraculous sight. A small, inviting cottage made entirely of gingerbread, frosted cakes, and glistening sugar windows, emanating an irresistibly sweet aroma. Hungry beyond measure and overjoyed by this unexpected bounty, Hansel and Gretel, without a second thought, began to break off pieces of the edible house and devour them. Suddenly, the charming illusion shattered. The cottage door creaked open, and an old woman emerged, seemingly kind and welcoming, her face etched with what appeared to be benevolent wrinkles. She invited them inside, offering a warm bed, comfort, and seemingly endless delicious food. But this was no benevolent grandmother. She was a wicked witch, a monstrous being who lured hungry, lost children to her house, not for shelter, but to fatten them up, and then, with gruesome intent, devour them. She immediately locked Hansel in a tiny, restrictive cage, forcing Gretel to become her servant, to do all the housework, and, with cruel irony, to prepare lavish meals for her brother, while the witch constantly checked Hansel's finger through the bars, to see if he was fat enough to eat. Clever Hansel, however, having grown resourceful in his captivity, offered a tiny bone instead of his plump finger, fooling the witch's notoriously poor eyesight and giving them precious time. Finally, impatient and ravenously hungry, the witch decided she could wait no longer. She would eat Hansel anyway. She stoked the huge oven until it glowed with an infernal heat, and then ordered Gretel to climb inside to check if it was ready for baking. But Gretel, remembering stories of cunning and survival, and emboldened by desperation, pretended not to understand. "How do I get in?" she asked innocently. The witch, demonstrating her simple-mindedness and her overwhelming greed, impatiently poked her head into the scorching oven opening. Quick as a flash, with a surge of adrenaline, Gretel gave a mighty shove, pushing the wicked witch entirely inside, slammed the heavy iron door shut, and bolted it with a triumphant click. The wicked witch, trapped and screaming, was consumed by the very flames she intended for her victims. The children then discovered the witch's hidden treasures, glittering jewels and piles of gold, which they filled their pockets with. They found their way home, guided by a benevolent white duck across a river. The once daunting forest, now seeming less threatening. They returned to their repentant father, their days of hunger and fear forever ended by their newfound wealth, and lived happily ever after. Or so the story goes, in its most familiar iteration. The tale you've just heard, with its specific elements of the trail of breadcrumbs, the gingerbread house, and the children's clever triumph over the witch, is closest to the version meticulously documented and published by the revered Brothers Grimm in their renowned 1812 collection, Children's and Household Tales. This particular rendition codified many of the story's most iconic and memorable elements that endure to this day. However, the fundamental narrative vulnerable children abandoned in a harsh wilderness, a deceptive figure offering false succor, and the ever-present, horrifying threat of cannibalism doesn't begin with 19th century German folklorists. In fact, by the time it reached these esteemed collectors, it was already incredibly, impossibly ancient indeed, a testament to its profound and enduring resonance across human history and culture. Folklorists, those dedicated scholars who meticulously collect, compare, and analyze the countless stories passed down through generations, have identified this story pattern as one of the most persistent and globally distributed in human history. It falls under the Arne Thompson-Euther (ATU) Index, a comprehensive system for classifying folktales by their recurring motifs, character archetypes, and plot elements. This particular story is categorized as ATU 327A, The Children and the Ogre, or The Witch's House, a classification that encompasses a wide array of similar tales. There are countless known versions of this narrative, variations on this core, terrifying theme scattered across the globe, from the nuanced oral traditions of European peasants to ancient tales found in parts of Asia, Africa, and beyond. Each version, while adapted to its unique cultural context, its local creatures, and its specific dangers, invariably retains the same core ingredients: vulnerable children, a perilous journey into an alien, hostile wilderness, a deceptive and malevolent figure, often an ogre, a giant, a witch, or a cannibalistic monster, and the chilling, ever-present threat of consumption, often specifically anthropophagy, or cannibalism. And this leads us to the truly astonishing discovery of its age. While the precise origins of orally transmitted stories are inherently debated due to their fluid, evolving nature and lack of definitive written records, linguistic, And comparative folkloric studies overwhelmingly suggest that the core elements and deep structural motifs of the Hansel and Gretel tale are rooted in incredibly ancient Proto-Indo-European myths and folk narratives. This places its origins at least 500 years ago, potentially much earlier, reaching back into the early to middle Bronze Age, or even the Neolithic period, a time of immense environmental and societal shifts. This means it predates many foundational written texts, including much of the Old Testament. It was being whispered around communal fires, likely as a stark cautionary tale or a deeply symbolic narrative, long before the rise of classical Greek civilization, before the grandeur and might of the Roman Empire, before the great medieval famines of Europe, that historians often cite as contexts for this tale. It is a narrative passed by word of mouth across countless generations, carried through vast human migrations, through the rise and fall of ancient societies, through periods of immense societal upheaval and transformation, and across millennia. And somehow, impossibly, remarkably, it survived, adapting and shifting, yet retaining its terrifying primal core. So, the crucial question then becomes, why does this specific, deeply unsettling pattern echo across so many cultures and so much time? What deep universal truths about human nature and survival, what primal fears, what forgotten societal conditions are we truly remembering when we tell this story today? The answer lies in stripping away the comforting layers of later, more sanitized versions and looking at the older, darker, more direct tellings. Let's begin by looking at the chilling backdrop: famine. The Grimm brothers explicitly open their tale with the grim declaration of a great famine that has swept the land. For modern audiences, accustomed to readily available food, this might seem like a mere plot device, a convenient, if somewhat brutal, way to explain why parents would abandon their children. But for our ancient ancestors, famine was not an abstract concept. It was a recurrent, devastating, and omnipresent reality. Before modern agriculture, advanced global trade networks, and sophisticated food storage techniques, local crop failures due to adverse weather, prolonged droughts, harsh winters, or widespread disease could easily wipe out entire communities. When starvation became imminent, when every morsel of food was a struggle, unimaginable and morally repugnant choices often had to be made for the sheer continuation of life. This leads us to the story's darkest, most unsettling secret: child abandonment and the ultimate taboo, cannibalism. In many pre-Grimm, ancient versions of this motif, which exist in various cultures, the threat is not just general evil or a threat to life, but specifically the consumption of children. While the Grimm version attributes this desire to a supernatural witch, thereby distancing it slightly from human reality, the underlying, primal human fear is palpable. Anthropological and historical records, though grim and often suppressed, indicate that in times of extreme, prolonged famine and utter societal collapse, desperate human beings have, on incredibly rare and horrific occasions, resorted to anthropophagy as a last, desperate resort for survival. This was not a cultural practice. It was an act of absolute desperation, universally condemned as the ultimate taboo, but sometimes, unimaginably, unavoidable. The witch in the story, therefore, might not just be a fantasy creature. She could be a potent folk memory, a terrifying personification of the very real, unspeakable desperation and moral degradation that humanity faced during periods of acute, widespread starvation. She represents the ultimate transgression of human morality when pushed to the absolute brink, a dark mirror reflecting humanity's deepest fears about itself. Her house, tempting and edible, is a cruel inversion of the nurturing, safe home, luring children to their doom with the very promise of food they so desperately crave. The forest itself, as we discussed with Little Red Riding Hood, is a deeply symbolic and psychologically charged space. It is the wilderness, the dangerous, untamed and mysterious realm that lay just beyond the ordered, safe and communal boundaries of human settlement. It is where societal rules break down, where primal instincts dictate survival, and where the veneer of civilization is peeled away. For ancient peoples, who lived far more intimately with nature, deeply reliant on its provisions, the forest was both life-giver and terrifying devourer. It was the place of wild animals, unknown spirits, malevolent forces, and the ultimate test of human resilience and cunning. When Hansel and Gretel are led into the forest, they are not simply lost. They are crossing a profound symbolic boundary, entering a realm where human morality is stripped away by hunger, and where the forces of chaos and death hold sway. Their repeated attempts to find their way back, first with pebbles, then with breadcrumbs, symbolize humanity's desperate struggle to maintain connection to civilization and order in the face of overwhelming primal threats. The failure of the breadcrumbs is particularly poignant and devastating. Nature itself, the birds, conspires against their return, swallowing the very means of their salvation, pushing them deeper and deeper into the terrifying, unknown heart of the wild. And then there's the witch's house itself, a structure made entirely of food. This element is highly unusual, uniquely captivating, and profoundly symbolic. It is the ultimate lure, a cruel and insidious deception that plays directly on the most fundamental and desperate human need for sustenance. For starving children, weak and disoriented, such a house would appear as an irresistible miracle, a blessed mirage, an immediate and divine answer to their most desperate prayers. But it is, in fact, a trap. This edible house can be seen as a powerful metaphor for false abundance, a seductive illusion that promises life and salvation but, in reality, delivers death and destruction. In a world plagued by real and recurrent famines, the dream of a house made of readily available food would have been a potent, almost archetypal image of longed-for security. But it also represents the profound danger of succumbing to temptation, of trusting appearances, and of entering a space that promises salvation but delivers exploitation and ultimate demise. It's a house of seemingly endless plenty that devours, an inverse of the nurturing, protective home. The witch herself is another fascinating and terrifying archetype. She is almost universally depicted as an old woman, seemingly frail or welcoming, which allows her to effectively deceive her young victims. But her true nature is monstrous, embodying the very fears that the tale so vividly exposes. In many ancient belief systems across the globe, witches, sorceresses, or malevolent old women were figures who operated outside the normal bounds of society, often associated with dark magic, grotesque consumption, and the perversion of natural order. Her chilling insistence on fattening up Hansel is not just a grotesque detail. It underscores the specific, horrifying intent of cannibalistic consumption. Her poor eyesight, allowing Hansel to trick her with a bone, is a common motif in folklore, often symbolizing a supernatural creature's reliance on more primal senses, like smell, for the scent of human flesh, over true visual perception, and crucially, a weakness that human cunning and quick thinking can exploit. Finally, the children's cleverness and ultimate triumph. This is the core message of resilience and ingenuity that allowed the tale to endure and adapt across millennia. Hansel's initial foresight with the pebbles and later the bone, and Gretel's extraordinary quick thinking and bravery in tricking the witch into the blazing oven, are absolutely crucial to their survival. In many older versions, the children's triumph is not just about physical escape, but about overcoming overwhelming odds through sheer ingenuity and courage. They defeat the very force that embodies their deepest fears: starvation and being consumed. The act of pushing the witch into the oven is particularly symbolic. The oven, a primal place of cooking, transformation, and sustenance, becomes the instrument of the witch's gruesome demise. She, who intended to cook and consume others, is herself consumed by the very tool of her dark, unnatural purpose. This act of cooking the cook, or the bite-a-bit, is a powerful and satisfying motif of cosmic justice and the dramatic reversal of roles. The discovery of treasure after the witch's death is also incredibly significant. It's not just a convenient happy ending. It signifies that after facing and conquering the ultimate threat to their existence, true prosperity, security, and a new life can be found. It is the tangible reward for enduring the unbearable ordeal, a symbolic return to a state of abundance and comfort after a harrowing journey through scarcity and terror. Their return to their repentant father and their newfound wealth signifies not only their physical return, but a symbolic reintegration into society, carrying the wisdom and strength gained from their ordeal. The story of Hansel and Gretel, in its deepest sense, functions as a powerful myth of initiation and survival. It explores the profound human fear of abandonment, the existential terror of hunger, and the ultimate horrifying taboo of cannibalism. It teaches about the cunning and deception one might encounter in a world where survival is paramount, and underscores the vital importance of resourcefulness, quick thinking, and inner courage in the face of overwhelming, life-threatening danger. The children's terrifying journey into the forest and their harrowing encounter with the witch is a symbolic passage through a terrifying ordeal from which they emerge not just physically alive, but stronger, wiser, and fundamentally transformed by their harrowing experience. They have faced humanity's darkest shadow, the breakdown of societal norms, under extreme duress and emerged victorious. So, when we look at Hansel and Gretel through this ancient, primordial lens, it transforms from a simple children's story into a chilling, deeply resonant myth. It's a story about the universal fear of scarcity, the primal dread of starvation, the terrifying choices born of desperation, and the enduring threat of human malevolence when basic needs become paramount. It's a tale that has survived for millennia because it speaks to fundamental human experiences, the vulnerability of the young, the insidious nature of temptation, and the enduring human capacity for cunning, resilience, and hope in the face of existential threat. The lost crumbs, the edible house, the devouring witch, these are not just elements of a fanciful story, but potent, enduring symbols encoded with ancient wisdom and visceral warnings, passed down from a time when these threats were not merely metaphors, but daily, horrifying realities that shaped the very fabric of human life and human morality. Perhaps this tale isn't fiction at all, but a deep-seated memory, a haunting echo of a time when the world was a far hungrier, more perilous place, and the wisest, most crucial lessons were those whispered from one generation to the next, disguised as a simple story about children and a witch. And if that thought has you looking at your own pantry with new eyes, at the shadows in your own safe home with a chilling new awareness, wait until you hear the truth behind other folklore stories.